LPC, LMFT, and our social work, we'd like you to please enter the sign-in code that I'm going to announce very shortly. Put it into the sign-in link that you will find in the chat box. The sign-in link will be live for about 15 minutes. Also, listen for the sign out code to place in the sign out link that's going to be found in the chat box towards the end of the session. Again, the link will be live for about 15 minutes. You're going to also need to provide your name and the license types for your CEUs. List of CEUs will complete the conference evaluation. And the evaluation link is going to be posted in the chat box in the very last session each day. And it's also going to be on our Pathways website for those who do not attend the entire day. Now, throughout the conference, please only use the Ask the Question box to post questions for the speakers related to their presentation today. You may use the chat box to engage with other participants, or if you have technical questions, and also to find the CEU sign in and sign out links. I'm going to follow the Ask a Question box and try to combine like questions and then share with the presenters after the presentation. So, personal information can be seen by all, so please consider this when posting in the chat or Ask a Question boxes. Now, the CEU sign-in code for this session is 56. Sign in is 56. And remember, you're only going to have 15 minutes to submit your request. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful speakers for the day. For this session, which is entitled Dialectical Behavior Therapy, Informed Parenting Skills for Caregivers of Youth. Today, welcome Helen Lovick, who is a therapist of a DBT group, and her lovely daughter is with her. Her name is Helen Stolte, and Helen is a consultant and researcher in the field of mental health, and she has a background in health law and bioethics. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you very much. So I'm Liz Lovrix, and I'm going to take you through the slides, and Helen is here beside me. So welcome, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who has signed up and came to this very unique conference. A lot of work and effort has gone into making this happen, which is just reflective of all the passion and care and hope that we all have for improved mental health access and services. And in doing so, I do want to quickly just thank Doug and Cynthia for all the work they did, Adam, Susan, Charlotte, and today, Peter and Carol. So I'm going to go through the slides. So today we're going to talk about a DBT informed parenting skills group that we devised with my colleagues here in Canada, and that we've used in multiple situations and services that I'm going to go through as well. I'm going to give a little a brief description of DBT for those of you who have not been introduced to it very intensively. And I'm going to go through the rest of the slides to kind of model the group in the way that we present the ideas and educational components and skill buildings to parents, and so that you get an idea of what it could feel like, what it could look like, and how the information is transmitted. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction of the adolescent brain and how we present it to the parents, skills and techniques to improve communication, how to manage intense emotions and set limits, and ways in which mindfulness could be presented to parents so that it's accessible and non-prescriptive and can be used in many different ways, and the value of using it. So our DBT program is evidence-based and research-informed. We took it from the DBT literature, and we also continue to provide assessments and evaluations of the program as it evolved and grew since 2012. We use a psychoeducational format, and it's a supportive and therapeutic in that the facilitators are therapists that have quite a bit of extensive background in working with families and young people with mental health issues, as well as dialectical behavior therapy. We take an attachment theory and trauma lens approach, as well as collaborative problem solving. And that also lends very nicely to the DBT biosocial aspect of the therapeutic model. We also took a lot of time and consideration to figure out the structure, because we also realized that a lot of parents and youth have a lot of difficulties and challenges already in their lives, and we had to be very mindful of the ways in which that we could make it the most accessible to a wide group of people with similar interests, so that they can get the maximum amount of the information and skills from our program. We also recognized gaps in the system, so we tried to create a program that addressed the many gaps that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And we also considered little things that aren't that little, is the time of day, how many times a week could they see, once a week, every other week, and also realizing that people are so busy that serving food or meals or something of that nature to nourish people is also a very important part of the program, because often we tend to forget or neglect our own needs when we're busy managing the many things that we have to manage in our lives. So we found that there were many gaps in providing treatment for young people, primarily because of their age group and the busyness and all the competing interests that are around young people's lives. If a young person needs to go to the hospital or has an intervention through a therapist or outpatient services, they learn all these skills and information on how to cope, and then they go home to a family of caring people, and they're left going, I don't know how to help. I don't know what to do. What is it that they're learning? What is it that I can do to help my youth or young person so they don't need to go back into the hospital, or that I can continue maintaining the supports that they received through the healthcare professionals. So this is one of the primary reasons that we created this, is because parents often talked about not having the skills or the knowledge that they might need in order to help their kids to make the changes and improvements that they started to make through their accessing the resources. We also looked at other models, like Family Connections exists in the communities, and it's a support program for families who have young people in their lives with borderline personality disorder. So it was quite specific in its group format, and we wanted to extend it to be available for adolescents and parents. The program also has ongoing monitoring and evaluation, which Helen is going to talk about later. In forming the group, we were very careful to make it exciting, valuable. Now that people are taking time out of their lives, we wanted to make sure it was relevant and that it was meaningful, and it wasn't a waste of their time. So we used media, multimedia, role plays. Helen and I are going to demonstrate some of the role playing that we did, or will do. Mindfulness exercises. We also encourage people to do homework. It's not an expectation. It's more or less a practicing of the concepts and the skills that we go over in the course. The course usually is about an hour and a half, and it's, again, we had to be mindful of the resources that we had available in terms of how much time and space and room that we had available as well. We maintain documentation, and we're very mindful of the costs and supplies that were needed, and to keep it minimal. So our group has 8 modules that we developed and we found to be the most effective, and it seems to work in parcels as well, that they could be delivered separate to a group format and could be also delivered in workshops at schools, at other organizations that need help in a particular area. So the first module is understanding the adolescent brain. What's behind the behavior? What's going on in a teenage brain that is separate from the problematic behaviors? Then we spend a good chunk of time how to validate. You may come across people talking about how important validation is and how validation can really generate very full, effective communication and conversations amongst people. Helen and I are going to demonstrate that towards the later part of the presentation. Then emotion regulation. We often see young people dysregulated, their moods take over, and not only do our young people's moods take over, but so do ours, and how to manage the distresses and tolerate difficult times. Then the other thing we go over with parents is how to set limits and have effective communication with our young people. So setting limits is how to say no to what you don't want in your life and how to get your needs met. And that doesn't only go for the adolescents, but it also goes for parents. Now, family relationships covers why we do what we do as parents. Sometimes we will say to ourselves, I'm not going to do what my parent did, and yet we find we are doing it. So kind of have a safe place where we can discuss what is behind our decision making and our responses as well. Then we go into middle path to parenting as a team, how to manage those conflict situations. And then we discuss the more difficult, more challenging topics that most of us deal with on a regular basis, is managing the strong emotions as parents of guilt, shame, blame, and immense amount of judgments. How to let go of those judgments. And then at the very end, we celebrate, we let go, we go over skills, we talk about all the things that we've learned and go over and celebrate the changes that families have noticed in their families. So very quickly, DBT is a therapeutic framework that was developed by Marshall Linehan in the 1990s, working directly with young people with borderline personality diagnosis. And it came out of people noticing that there was a segment of people in the hospital and the psychiatric wards that were going in and out, and they didn't seem to respond to treatment. And also the doctors and the people tending to the patients were getting frustrated that no matter how much they tried to help these young people or people with borderline, they didn't seem to be getting better. So there was this discordance between healthcare professionals and the clients. Marcia Linehan also considers the biosocial model, which I'm going to go over and show how this relates to the parent group, takes in consideration CBT and Zen mindfulness. And also the dialectics, to be able to hold two concepts at once. It's extremely important for people who are dysregulated to be able to accept that their problems are difficult and hard, and they're doing the best they can. And I'm going to go into a little example of how we present that to parents. Then we have assumptions about clients that we kind of use as very important and concepts that we have to keep in our minds all the time when we work with very challenging situations and moments. It's a skill-based therapy. Instead of looking at deficits in the people, we look at deficit of the skills that we might have. So the way that I look at DBT is Marshall Linehan seemed to figure out the steps that it's involved in order to get through challenging times and broke it down. I look at it like driving a car. For some of us that have been driving cars for many years, like I have, I don't think about all the mechanics that are involved in driving a car. So unless someone says, how do you do it? You think, oh, right, this is how you do it. And then you have to kind of parcel apart all the steps that are involved. And what DBT is to me is that we take some of our taken for granted skills and we parcel them out into tiny little baby steps, and we help other people learn them who seem to be not quite sure how to manage. The other thing about DBT that's very compelling, it does allow for problem solving, and we all love to problem solve. And sometimes even as therapists, we have to slow down and not hurry to problem solve when we have to listen to our clients. It's also a collaborative approach, and it allows us to work in tandem with our patients and clients and the people that we're with, rather than looking at that's kind of that they're struggling, what's wrong with them, and I have to have all the answers. We figure it out together and we move through their journey with our clients. So the DBT principle of acceptance and change is extremely important, that we have to accept that there is a problem and the way that we're managing and doing things in our lives is difficult. And then in order to change that, we have to have some kind of switch in the way that we manage ourselves and we manage our environment. And DBT has 4 modules that they teach, and that is mindfulness, tolerating distress, learning effective communication skills for interpersonal effectiveness, and regulating emotions. So one of the most key elements of this DBT framework that I present to the parents at the beginning is accepting reality. And that this is a key thing on how do we look at our lives. For instance, I'm sure all of us have been stuck in traffic, stuck in really bad traffic, and we're going to be late for wherever we need to be. So we have choices in situations like that. We could make it worse. We could make it worse by crashing into the car in front of us, or honking the horn and starting to disturb other drivers around us. We could stay miserable. I could stay miserable in my car and just keep hitting the steering wheel and keep yelling at myself and yelling at the person beside me about how upset I am that I'm going to be late. Or I can accept the fact that I'm stuck in traffic. I am stuck in traffic. There's not much I can do right now. And once I'm at that point where I'm acceptance, then I can clear my head of that anger and frustration and miserableness and start looking at maybe changing how I feel about the problem and begin to think of the problem as maybe I could call ahead. Now I'm problem solving. I can maybe listen to a podcast that may help me later on tomorrow or today. I can start having a conversation with the person beside me that might be meaningful. So once that we've accepted, our brains are open to having a different way of dealing with a challenging situation. The other thing about DBT is skills training. So emotion regulation addresses that people lack the skills to regulate their emotion and ability to self-soothe. The distress tolerance indicates that people have a hard time managing their emotions, and their response to situations often makes things worse. We've all been in that situation, I'm sure. The interpersonal effectiveness section is about communication styles. Sometimes people without the skill for effective communication don't know how to ask for their needs and don't know how to say no to things and things that are difficult in their lives. And mindfulness is being aware of what's going on with you at that time, in that moment, and noticing when anxiety, worries, and depression are taking over your ability to think clearly. Walking the middle path, people see the world in black and white. It's helping people not see the world in black and white and seeing alternatives and seeing the middle path as grays or plaid. So the assumptions of DBT that we bring forward to the parents on many occasions is we have to believe that everybody's doing the best they can with what's going on in their lives, with the skills that they have at that time. So it's also, we have to believe that we may not like the way that we're behaving in certain situations, that the youth don't like it when they've dysregulated. We don't like it either when we've lost our cool with our kids. And that we can learn skills to respond differently and have a better outcome. We all want to do better. I really believe that people, when we wake up in the morning, we don't think to ourselves, I'm going to mess up the day. We think today's going to be a better day. And things get in the way of it happening. So it's about learning new skills and new ways to manage challenging situations. The other important one is that people don't cause all their problems. If I'm coming to a presentation and I get sprayed by a bus driving by and my clothes are all dirty, I didn't cause my clothes to be dirty, and I can't go after the bus driver to clean my clothes. So it will be my problem to fix. So this also helps people take responsibility for their lives rather than finding at fault in everybody else and blaming everyone for the way that their lives are. It gives you a sense of agency and an ability to be an active member in your life rather than being passive. So one of the things that we're very mindful is life for our teenagers is not an easy life. When I was young, my mother looked at Benjamin Spock on how to raise me. There was no internet. There was no Googling how to do what to do. My parents' family was in another country across the ocean. They figured it out with what they had on their hand. Today, it's a much more complicated world than it was when we were young people. It's a technological age where it's hard to keep up with the changes, the influence of social media, influence of having a super powerful pocket computer, which is your phone, the generation gap that has gotten bigger and continues to become uncertain, the impact of globalization, the economic, the environmental worries. I could go on. It's a very problematic, difficult time for our young people, as it is for us. And no one could have even predicted the pandemic and how it was going to play out and what it was going to do to young people's lives and ours as well as the adults. So keeping all this in mind and being mindful that nothing is simple and there isn't a cookie cut family amongst us, we can look at how to understand behavior that maybe is common to most people. So we talk about why this challenging behavior might be happening. What does it serve? What is the purpose of some of the behaviors you might see? And then developing a broader range of ways of responding and managing it, and learning interventions that may help for a different outcome and breaking those patterns that we're kind of stuck in when we have difficult situations. And the nice thing about this program and using the DBT model is how it really helps people to move away from judgments and making inaccurate assumptions. So there is a little bit of psychoeducational component to the program where we tell people that people do things for basic reasons. We go over that people do things because it feels good. We do things because we don't want to get into trouble or avoid an uncomfortable situation. We do things because we want people to notice us and to engage with us and connect. And we do things because we want things. We go to job in order to be able to buy groceries or to be able to acquire things. The other thing that's really important for us to talk about with families is to acknowledge that mental health. And what does mental health mean? So I put in here the WHO definition of it. And just so that people remember that just because we can't see the brain and it's a very hard organ or part of our body to manage when it's not feeling well, unlike a temperature or a broken leg or a bruise on the arm, our brains sometimes get tired and overworked, and the chemistry and the working bits of our brain sometimes need to take a rest or need to be healed and need to have proper medical attention as well. The other thing that is important for families to remember is resiliency. Resiliency is a word that I think is very useful to go over with people because we aren't born resilient, we become resilient through our life and learning from life and the adversities that we're able to get through and the challenging times that we manage to succeed and make better choices or different choices in order to reach our goals. There is a way to build resiliency, and there is a way to keep in mind that when things are constantly challenging to a family or to a system or to a child, they can get tired, they can get burned out, and they do need to be looking for repair and resources and supports. We also look at the understanding that people are also a product of their biology and their environment, and that we act, it's the nature versus nurture. We come with chromosome sets of both of our parents, and then also we're influenced by the kind of environment that we're raised in and the things that we encounter. This is a section of DBT that really resonates with the families as it resonated with me when I learned about it, is the dandelion versus the orchid child. So we also have different temperaments. Some of us are more sensitive, some of us are more stoic. There's different language we can use to describe that, but I'm sure many of you who are listening today have been given an orchid. And that beautiful orchid, you looked after, you tended to it, and next thing you know, you're throwing the orchid into the garbage because it had died. And then you have the dandelion in your lawns that you can't seem to get rid of. So the orchid is a plant that requires counterintuitive care. It requires a northern exposure, little sun, it requires a little bit of water and very little soil. So if you give the orchid what other flowers would want or need, you're actually hurting your orchid. And that's like a sensitive child. And many of us may have two children where they're so different. We have that sensitive child and the dandelion child, the child that doesn't seem to be bothered by much, gets through everything, just gets up, shakes off the bruises and continues. The nice thing to believe is that orchid can grow and heal and dandelions can break. So we do need to look after our dandelions as well. And then I threw in the cactus because I've worked with adolescents for the last 20 years. And I'm sure other people can imagine this too. Sometimes we're sitting beside an adolescent and it feels like we're sitting by a cactus. So I'm going to go over that in a few minutes. So the other thing to remember is emotional sensitivity and reactivity vary amongst different people. For me, when it takes me a long time to get angry, and then it takes me quite a while to get over my anger. My partner, on the other hand, my husband, his anger can go up really quickly, and then his anger can also just go away as quickly. And next thing I know, he's watching the Raptors while I'm still wanting to have the fight with them. Then there's also people have different emotional responses. When I'm scared, I need to have complete silence around me. When my husband's afraid, he needs to talk. So when we're in a scary situation together, we're kind of frustrating each other. So I've had to ask my husband if he could just please be quiet so that I can get through a difficult situation. So it's not about it being right or wrong. It's different temperaments that we're born with that we're having to navigate our lives. Now, also other things influence our temperament, such as if I'm hungry, I'm more irritable. If I'm sick, maybe I'm less able to be attentive. If I'm tired, if I didn't sleep enough, I may not respond in the best way possible. So these things also influence our temperaments, as well as other things that might be going on, like a busy work day. And for many people during these challenging times when school has been closed, all the children are around as you still have to manage with work responsibilities. The other thing that we have to remind each other or ourselves is that children go through different stages of development. And the nice thing about the adolescent changes is that it's opportunities for change. This is when their front cortex is growing and maturing. And this is also when new connections can be made and they can learn new behaviors. There's a lot of similarities between our adolescents and toddlers. The difference is that our adolescents are much bigger and know how to argue with us better. So this is a bit of a humorous take on a teenage brain. I remind and I invite the parents to remember what it was like when they were a teenager, that their brains were structurally, fundamentally different. And there's an adaptive reason for that to be, is because if all our brains were adult brains, we'd have a pretty boring life, because we need our teenagers with their more risk-taking, more challenging behaviors to challenge social norms and to allow our society to continue to evolve and grow. So while their brain is developing at this time, it's going through cognitive changes, emotional changes. They're also, the front part of their cortex of their brain is growing and maturing. And so they're learning how to set limits on themselves and become the adults that they're going to be. So I often go over the ways that the teenager presents themselves to our parents, that they're full of contradictions all over the place. They want you to change, but don't you dare change. They want to be like other kids, but they want to be completely unique. They want freedom. They need fences. They feel like nothing bad will ever happen to them, yet they have a ton of fears. They want you to go away, but don't go away. One minute they're sitting in your lap, one minute they're pushing you away. Their brains are also very powerful at this time, and they are also quite vulnerable. So dopamine is the hormone that's being sent throughout their brains at this time. It's called the happy hormone. It allows them to look forward to fun things, which kind of takes over responsible things sometimes. This is when the integrating of thoughts and skills, and this is the connection, and the neurotransmitters are happening. So they learn things much faster. It's also not an efficient machine. It's an inefficient machine because all these things are going on. So they will tell you that they can multitask. Research has shown they are actually not good multitaskers. So when they say that I have to listen to music to study, what research is showing is that they're going to enjoy studying more because they're able to listen to music. So they can really get into circular arguments with you that you don't even know where they came from. And this is also when pruning happens. If they're not going to use certain things and certain behaviors, then they lose it. So if they learned a language when they were young children, if they don't continue to practice that language, they may learn or forget that language. So again, here there's a list of things that you might see in the adolescent of some of the behaviors that is quite normal and can be frustrating. Things like you can ask your teenager who, what, where, and when, but as soon as you say, why did this happen, or why did you do it, you have this completely confused look on their face. They have no idea how to answer that. That's not because they're being difficult or challenging. They may actually not know. They have an amazing ability to do very quick pros and cons. They're just not the pros and cons that adults do. And that's why sometimes their solutions to situations are not always the best. So they're getting to know who they are separate to you. They want to separate to the parents. They want to figure out who they are as young adults. So it's very natural for them to push the adults in their lives away, because if they continue to be like a 5 or 6 year old, then they'll never learn how to be themselves separate to you. As much as, so that little baby that loved you and worshiped you, that person is still there, except they're trying to be who they are separate to their parents. So this is a good hand model that Dan Siegel often mentions. It's that flipping the lid. So you have your spine is your arm is a spinal cord. This is your amygdala, the limbic system, where your emotions and memory and those kind of quick reaction brain activity is. And then this is the cortex that goes over your head that's forming, which is your executive functioning and be able to calm or tame the emotional part. So it's very normal to see the teenager flipping their lids, as it's said, because the world is a chaotic, busy, difficult, challenging, confusing place. Their emotions take over, and then they hand your emotions to you in a silver platter, and you're holding their emotions and you're going, yikes, what am I going to do with that? So there's also, this is a time of vulnerability factors as well. A lot of competing forces for your teenagers' attention, including technology and gaming and all the things that the internet provides that they know way more much about it than we do. Learning disabilities come out. Anxiety and stress takes a whole new level for some of them. There's worries about social isolation that I certainly see quite a bit here in the work the people that I've worked with. And also some of the more risky, scary, challenging behaviors really take a foothold, whether it's self-harming, suicidal thoughts and urges. It's their way of coping with the difficulties that they're trying to manage. So through this conversation with the parents, we're able to have them or invite them to see their kids' behaviors not as good or bad, more like a figuring out in their journey of who they are and the challenges that they're coming across through their day-to-day living. So we're asking, why is it happening? What can I do to respond differently or to make it better? What can I do? What new skills can I try? And what new skills can I help my teenager use? So the biosocial section of the DBT lends itself to the group as well. And this is what we talk about when we introduce validation as well as the family relations. The studies have shown that young people who have pervasive dysregulation, they grew up in an invalidating environment. So that goes back to the dandelion young person who was perhaps in an environment that just didn't match theirs. And they could have been tearful or emotionally more readily able to show strong emotions. And the response could be, stop that, there's nothing to cry about, you'll be fine. Or when they're signaling to you that they're upset, you don't see what's upset for them because everything is going to be okay in your mind, but in their mind, they're distressed. Sometimes what may happen is a young person may sit beside their parent wanting to connect, or they do the dishes, or they make their bed, or they quietly do what would make any parent happy, and a parent might think, my kid's doing what my kid should do. And the person that the parent may have to spend a lot of attention with is the one that is acting out and is causing distress to the family, or is just a more outgoing kind of personality, and then the other personality doesn't know how to compete with that. Sometimes an invalidating environment might just be that people don't see that another person's struggling with a problem, and to other people it might seem simple. So it's oversimplified, or things that might be too challenging, or not even too challenging. A parent might just say, try not to do that because it's too difficult for you. So these are just some examples of how an environment can be invalidating. And the problem with that is it causes young people, or causes people, and what I ask people to do when I talk about this is, rather than look at your child or your children or your adolescent, but to think about what it was like for you to grow up and what kind of environment you grew up in, because that is more readily available for you. And then you can maybe better understand why you do things, as opposed to feel even worse or badly about the way that you may have responded to situations with your child. So people who are raised in an invalidating environment don't always trust their own feelings and responses to the world. So they think there's something wrong with them. So I wrote down some examples of what you might be able to see with people that are living in, who grew up not with their emotions not being validated. I put in a couple of slides about trauma. I don't want to spend too much time on trauma because I do want to go through the skills, but trauma is something that many, many young people have encountered. There's the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience surveys or studies that are out there that validate that. And so if you want, these slides will be available to you in a PDF form after the conference, and so you'll be able to kind of go over these as well. And just to kind of remind ourselves that sometimes we respond to difficult situations because of trauma or fear of what has happened, and rather than what might actually be going on. And sometimes you have people responding like the scared rabbit, or someone who's quite aggressive, or someone who hides and avoids and runs away from situations. And it's not because, again, they're being bad or difficult, it's the way that they've learned to cope with difficult situations. And just reminding ourselves that trauma impacts every single part of our brain and learning abilities. Because if we're too busy learning, trying to figure out how to live through our lives, then it's hard for us to learn. So being mindful that trauma might be in front of us, and to be mindful about how we are responding to it, because people are doing the best they can, and there needs to be kind of an attention to the possibility of trauma background. So back to DBT, the dialectics, it's about being able to hold two concepts at once and being able to appreciate or accept that my kid could hate me and love me at the same time. I could be very angry with my child and I could still love my child to pieces. Both could be true at the same time. And by accepting these dialectics and being able to recognize them, we can go from the polarized ends of the black and white spectrum and be able to have more meaningful conversations and discussions. The example I often bring to parents is, once you notice dialectics, you'll notice they're everywhere. You could be happy and sad at the same time. Now, in terms of parenting, your adolescent wants to stay out after midnight, and you don't. Perfect example of what fights might be about. So the adolescent knows what it's like at midnight because they're out in that environment and they know who's with them, who's not with them, what they plan to do, where they're going. They know all the details they think they need to know. As a parent, we know that after midnight, or pick any arbitrary time at night, there's less people around, it's darker, fewer places are open, there's less abilities for people to stay safe. So both are true. They know what they plan to do and how safe they are, and we also know, and it's true, that it could also be more problematic. So one of the, if we were able to do this in front of an audience, I would be asking people if they could see the duck or the rabbit. Some people will see a duck, some people will see a rabbit. Both are there. And the nice thing, or what I love about this exercise, is the moment when you see the rabbit and the duck, there's a bit of a relief, a tiny twinge of a, whew, I see both. Because then you realize that you belong, that you share what other people share. You're no longer isolated or separated. So once you see dialectics, it's really helped with relationships, because you're able to see the other person's point of view, and then you could say, I see that. I see why you're saying that. It makes sense to me, and I'm wondering if you could see what I see as well. So you're recognizing that there is not only one truth, because sometimes we find that we're arguing with our teenagers about the truth, and about our truth, rather than seeing it from their point of view. And when you can do that, you're showing the person you're with that you're listening, you're actively listening, and that you're working towards decreasing conflict. And the important thing that resonates with parents as they go through this program is they are learning to let go of being right, because parents are right many times, and work on becoming more effective. So polarizations happen with very regular things in families. Should I be strict? Should I be loose? Should they be independent? Should I hold on to them a bit tighter? Should they use public transport? Should they have their own bank account? And then sometimes the flip-flopping. I'm not sure. Should I second guess myself about this one? What's normal? What's not normal? Is this too safe? Is there drinking out of hand, or is this normal adolescent behavior? So these are the kinds of things that you're always weighing. And I realize many people that I work with, they're walking on eggshells in their own family. And I find that not only are the parents walking on eggshells, but so are the adolescents. And then when we hold on to our position, is it because we're afraid of letting go? What would happen if I let my kid do this? Or what would happen if I don't let my kid do this? And for some of our families, the risk of letting go or doing something different can, in their minds, be a matter of life and death. So we also have to be aware of how to let go of things that we're afraid of because of the consequences. And then there are some families that are always seems to be in crisis, and some families are just numb to the situations. And it's this balancing act that we have to constantly figure out. And not only with ourselves, but also with the people around us, whether the other people involved in our family and in our lives. So the middle path is a way to kind of move away from the polarization, and that goes back to acceptance and change. We are disagreeing. We don't see it the same way. Help me understand your point of view so that I can be more available and we can have a better outcome of the conversation. And check out your assumptions. Maybe I think something is happening when it's not really happening. Check the facts. And just by going to a middle path, we encourage parents to believe that they're not giving in or compromising, they're not agreeing, they're listening. And I'm going to go through mindfulness in a few more slides, but mindfulness is really important because you have to be able to check in yourself about, why does this matter to me right now? Why am I sticking to my end of the spectrum? Why won't I let go? So motion regulation we're going to go through these slides. So mindfulness, I want to make sure we get to do some of the role play. So I'm going to speed up a little bit here, but that mindful mind is our regular mind, and being mindful is when we can clear out the clutter and be present. So we do sections on mindfulness throughout the whole program, realizing that we need emotional selves and we need our reasonable selves, but sometimes our emotional selves can make it worse for us, and sometimes our reasonable self, we miss opportunities for connection. So noticing our emotion selves and noticing our reasonable selves is the wise mind when we are in touch with both sides of ourselves. So to being mindful, we teach them it's about observing your environment. It's about describing your environment using non-judgmental words and participating fully, not having 10 things going on in your mind like in that picture. And how you do it not judgmentally. You stick to the facts, you focus on one thing at a time, and you do what works and let go of what isn't working. So to be in wise mind, you have to reduce your reactivity, and that means looking after yourselves, and that means parents needing to look after themselves. And to reduce the intensity is naming and taming that emotional state. I'm angry right now, you've already brought it down. So again, there's examples of how to increase your emotional tolerance and increase being effective. So when you look at a picture like this, which I've been told by many people, it's not at all nearly as bad as their adolescent's room. It's how to look at this room in a non-judgmental way so that you can have a conversation with your young person about making change. So then we talk about fears. We all have a lot of fears, and fears often drive our responses. So it's important to know that we need to be emotional beings. That's what humans are. Emotions have purpose, they have urges, you feel more than one, they don't last forever, and they're complicated. And by us being aware of our emotional selves, we're teaching our adolescents to be aware of their emotional selves. And being aware that sometimes we go into fight, flight, freeze, and it is a bodily experience that tells us that we're going through something emotionally before we even realize in our brains. So emotion regulation is we over-signal, we make it worse. We don't get what we want. We misinterpret, we misunderstand our environment, and we do it in order to control our emotions rather than it controlling us. That's why we need to do emotion regulation. So when we're emotionally dysregulated, we can't see clearly. It's a flood. And then it's almost too late to help our kids settle down. So sometimes you need to let them ride through the emotion. The thing is that safety is always first. The way that you do that is you maintain your own control so you don't add to it. You look at it from curiosity. What's going on? What's happened to you? What can I do? And sometimes we have to help them understand that sometimes they are physically having a stomach ache and it's not anxiety. So DBT has a number of distress tolerance skills that could be downloaded. and I've put them here for people to look at, and they give guidance on how to help people come down from stressful situations and be prepared for stressful situations that might be coming ahead. So we're going to do some validation techniques right now, because we all invalidate, whether we mean to or not. It's not always a bad thing, but sometimes it just gets in the way of good conversations. So when we validate, there's a list of reasons that there's no downside to learning to validate or trying out validation. So how to validate? It's timing, it's eye contact, it's taking a non-judgmental stance, sometimes just being silent with the adolescent, tending to vulnerabilities. Maybe they need space, maybe they need a drink of water, maybe they need food. And really be careful of your vocabulary, because when we use the word but or should, we're adding to the tension and the difficulties. The word and has huge liberating powers, and it also moves people forward. And I really invite you to practice that. Whenever you come across using the word but, try to find the and see the impact it has. So, attunement. This is where we would like to stop sharing for a minute. We're going to demonstrate this. So, I'm the kind of person who absolutely loves turbulence. There aren't many people who love turbulence. I am one of them. How about you, Helen?
I hate it.
How much do you hate it?
Oh, it's the worst.
And I'm sure many people feel like Helen does. The problem with this is that I love turbulence on an airplane because it kind of rocks me to sleep. So, is turbulence always good, Helen?
No, it could be a really bad sign.
Right. So what I do is I check with the airline attendant to see if this is an opportunity for me to relax or should I actually panic. So I've looked at the airline stewardess and I checked the fact, and I can actually relax because the airline attendant is smiling and going around checking in with people. So then I look at Helen and I realize her fear of this situation is actually making me not enjoy my turbulence, because I can pick up her emotional state because I'm sitting beside her and that's what emotions do. So I have a couple of choices because I want to enjoy my flight. So Helen, how are you doing?
Awful.
Awful. So my choice is that I can go awful with her and go, oh my God, Helen, I could really pick up that you're really not enjoying this flight. So I think I'm going to panic with you. Would that be good?
Well, exactly. This is a really bad situation and we could all die.
So now we're both panicking, and I'm going to tell the whole plane to panic because we decided we want company. So that's one method. The other method is, because I'm being bothered by Helen's discomfort right now, I can say, Helen, can you please stop? Because there's nothing to be afraid of. Everything's fine.
What are you talking about?
Does that make you feel less anxious when I told you to stop?
No.
Right. So it doesn't work. What does work is if I look to Helen and I say, Helen, I notice you're really worried right now.
I am.
Are you worried about the turbulence?
Yes.
Okay. So Helen, would you like to not worry like me?
Yeah.
Okay, Helen. So why don't you try something with me? Why don't we take a couple of really deep breaths, because I'm right here beside you. I'm going to look after you. We're going to be okay.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
That sounds like a plan.
So the idea of attunement is that you recognize the other person's emotional state and you validate it, and then you help them through it, through role modeling, through nonverbal and verbal attunement. Sometimes we get it wrong, but luckily we can always make repairs. So when you're validating, you're not agreeing, you're not validating the invalid. You never validate bad behavior. By bad, I mean you don't validate aggression, hitting, kicking, spitting. And it's about letting go that you're right. It's about accepting that two things can be right at the same time. It's about an effective way to get from A to B. And it can be done verbally and non-verbally. And that we have to remember that everyone's doing the best they can. You validate feelings and emotions. You validate beliefs and opinions. Like Helen, I bet you believe that some airplanes can be unsafe. You validate someone wanting something or an expression of something. I get that you want the latest iPhone. It makes a lot of sense because most people your age would want the latest iPhone. You recognize someone's effort. I saw you try. I saw you make an effort. You studied a lot longer last night. And from your perspective, Helen, I get you wouldn't like airplanes or turbulence because maybe you had a bad experience on an airplane once. So when we validate, we have to realize it's not about only me, it's about the other person, my needs and wishes, their needs and wishes, my vulnerabilities, their vulnerabilities, and what else is taking my attention or wanting my attention or their attention. So here's a whole bunch of examples of 6 steps to validation that Helen and I are going to run through right now. So the first step is being present, being available, putting down what's in the way and taking away your attention. So Helen and I are going to try this and do this demonstration. Next slide. So Helen, I notice you're really upset right now. What's going on?
I don't want to talk about it.
You don't want to talk about it? So now I'm going to do the accurate reflecting. What happened?
I'm just really upset right now. Something happened at school.
So important thing is to hear what she said. You want to say back how you heard it, because if you say it back how you heard it, this is the time when corrections can be made. So you're upset because something happened to you at school today. Is that correct?
Yes, it has to do with my test.
Okay, so now she's letting me know it's to do with something academic. So I know things about my daughter, and I know that she is very concerned about her tests and has anxiety before she writes an exam. So you wrote your exam today, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, are you worried about how it went?
Yes.
Okay. I know that you really studied hard the night before because you're quite worried about how you would do.
Yes.
So then you understand the person, I forgot the mind reading bit, so I went ahead. The mind reading bit is that I know she's worried. I know she's anxious, and I know she's scared about the results or how well she did. She's probably self-critical. So I would say, I guess you're worried about how you did. Are you scared about not doing well?
Yeah, I don't know if I did well enough on it, and I'm worried that I would have failed.
So I know that she would worry about that. So I would say that probably most people are kind of worried about it, but maybe my daughter's worried about it more than other people. So when do you think you're going to get your test results back?
I don't know.
So what I do know, Helen, is that's very hard for you not knowing when you're going to get the test results. And I also know I would be very anxious not knowing when I'm going to get my test results because you have to wait and you don't have any control over finding it out any sooner. So those are things that kind of are normal for anyone to worry about because you don't have control about when the teacher might mark your exam. Just like it's very normal to be upset when you break up in a relationship. Those are times when you say, it makes sense that you're very upset because this is very painful or this is very hard for you. And then the last one, the radical acceptance is, it's hard, isn't it, Helen?
Yes, it's really hard and it's really upsetting.
And it's very upsetting. And I know it is. And you know what? Right now, we won't be able to find out how you did. And why don't we go get a drink of water or get you some snack or find something to distract her to move her further on in her life. So self-validation is very important because many of our young people don't have a very strong sense of self. They feel they have a low self-esteem. And so it's important that we have some kind of language or statements that we teach our kids on how to go through it. So non-judgmental is really important, that we kind of look at our bodies and ourselves and our thinking and our abilities without judging them, but to accept them as they are. So if we had more time, I'd go over how emotions work and how things could make it worse. For instance, if you're stuck on the side of the road and you have a flat tire, And then you get really worried because you don't know how to change your tire. So you're emotionally vulnerable. And then you have judgments about driving and being out alone. And then you get more upset because you don't know what to do. And then you dysregulate and start screaming or crying or becoming frozen. And then you have thoughts about how you hate driving, you're the worst driver in the world, and cars are ugly and cars are bad. And then you're looking for things that, of course, I'm a bad driver because I got a flat tire. And then you get more upset and you just relive the whole thing all over again. So in the 5 minutes that we have left to go over the basics of communication, I think what's really important about the communication section is that setting limits with young people is hard because there are risks and benefits to things that we set limits about. Saying no can be hard because sometimes the outcomes could be dangerous or unexpected. The thing about setting limits that often helps people to become better about it is stop, breathe, and think before you react. Think about what is it that's important, what is non-negotiable, what are you willing to accept, why does this matter? And also setting limits is necessary because it gives clarity to you and to your teenager. So the important thing about setting limits that I find even in my practice that is really exceptionally important to stress, why does it matter? What's the goal and what you're asking for? Is it to maintain a relationship? Is it self-respect? Or is it because you need something done? When you are clear about what your goals are, it's easier to stay on task and not get sidetracked into arguing about something that has nothing to do with what you started out with. So Dear Man is a tool that Marsha Linehan DBT came up with. It's how to ask for things what you want so that you can get them effectively. And even if it's not a guarantee you get what you want, but at least you feel that there is a connection and an effort made to understand one another. So then the way that you do it also is important. If you want to set a limit or your teenager needs to say no, then you use FAST. You have to be fair, don't apologize, stick to your value, and be truthful. If it's about maintaining a relationship, it's about being gentle, validating, and have a pleasant, gentle tone. So here's some examples of the I statements versus you statements. And what gets in the way sometimes is that we don't have the skill. We're too worried about things. Our emotions are too heightened. We're unsure of what we want, and it's the wrong time and place. So the couple of things that I have here are some DBT essential skills that I've included. The please skill to avoid from being vulnerable to your emotions is tend to your physical illness, your hygiene, exercise, avoid things that alter your mood that is not prescribed, ensure you sleep enough and that your adolescent sleeps enough and you eat well. Similarly, the tip skills is what brings people down from intense emotions. And there's a lot of research that validates that will be very helpful when your young person is having a hard time managing. So, Helen.
Well, with the 1 minute we have left, I'll just quickly summarize that we've done a lot of research about how well the program has been going, and the parents find it consistently to be satisfied with it and what they're looking for. And through observational research, we find that the parents enter it saying that they don't know how to parent, that they are defeated and they feel judged. And then through the program, by the end, they are using the skills, they find them effective, and they feel really optimistic. And then also through a lot of the participant feedback, the thing that stands out most is that they find that the program is a safe place and they feel valued and included, and that they really appreciate that it's a group that's specifically designed just for parents.
And I've included 2 videos that I encourage participants to look at. They've been very helpful in illustrating some of the concepts. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I went on a bit too long. I wish I had more time.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you beautifully. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Listen, thank you too for such an awesome presentation. I'm sure everyone on the call feels the very same way. You were really, really just wonderful. Now, everyone, please remember the sign out code for this session is 79. 79 is the sign out code, and the link is going to be in the chat box for you. And remember, you have 15 minutes to accomplish that. And before you'll be eligible to receive your CEU, please remember you need to complete a conference evaluation as well. We also want everyone else to complete a conference evaluation. Now, we do have a few questions, so let me pose those to you. Let's see, there's about 3 instances here where folks are wanting to definitely have a link to the slides or find out how they can get your copies of your slides. So I'll let you guys answer that.
So I'm going to provide a PDF format of the slides to Cynthia with Pathways. So if you could please kindly connect with the Pathways administrator, then they'll be able to send it to you. And I will also send the resources as well.
Very good. And then Tina just makes a comment that I think is so worthwhile hearing. She just mentions we need to be compassionate to ourselves and our abilities and work on strengthening how we can make a difference in helping others. And she's learned amazing skills today as far as parenting. So kudos to you too. She thought this was exceptional. Now,
thank you. Can I just add one comment? I really meant to say at the very beginning that parents come to us with a ton of skills and they are the experts of their children. And it's really always a pleasure to be able to learn from them and to help them understand all the skills and supports they already have that they forget about.
Okay, and then thank you, Helen. And then Tammy Ramsey would like to know, is this only for a teen that's diagnosed with mental illness, or can this be for parenting in general?
I use it for parents in general. I've gone to many schools in our city here to provide it at PTAs for just general population. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, how do we connect with Pathways coordinator to get the slides? I am certain that CJ is going to end up posting information on the Pathways to Hope.net website, as well as San Antonio's, and there could possibly be a Facebook connection. So you will receive information on where that's going to be. Okay, I think that may be all of the questions for you today. And again, thank you so much for the presentation. It was truly awesome.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Not a problem. And we also, one last thing, I'd just like to mention what a very great day this has been. And we hope that everyone has been inspired by the presentations that you heard. Don't forget to fill out the conference evaluation after you have attended all the sessions that you've chosen to help us with next year's planning. And then a completed conference evaluation is required for those needing CEUs. One more time. The conference evaluation link is in the chat box now, and it's on the conference website. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us for tomorrow's presentations because I'm sure they'll all be just as great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.